Next we're going to check the float cable for continuity. After some years, the places where these floats tend to age or wear would be right where the cable comes into the float, so between the brass plate and the styrofoam block here. Give a little tug on the cable here, and if there's a short or a break in this wire, it will be on the copper wire inside the insulation. So as you pull on this, you'll actually see the insulation stretch because the cable is not connected inside there. If you find that to be the case, you're probably just going to have to replace the float. I'm going to do the same thing on the other end of the float as well. Give this a little tug just to make sure that the solder joint inside here is good. We also like to clean these banana plugs, is what they're called, each year, because there does get to be some corrosion that can build up between the spring portion of this plug and the shaft portion. So again, we're going to use our contact cleaner. Just give a small squirt, and then I kind of squeeze and turn that back and forth in my fingers to really get the corrosion built off of there. And that contact cleaner will kind of stay in here and keep good contact the next time you push it into the booster. Now the other side of the float generally needs to be cleaned as well, and that's the brass plate on the bottom of the float. As you can see, this one is real corroded. So what we're going to do here is we'll unwrap the string, and we're either going to clean this up with a wire brush or with steel wool, or when we do it, we clean it with a wire brush in our shop. Now the float is nice and cleaned, and we could check to see if we've got good continuity on this cable now. The way we do that would be to set our voltmeter to ohms. So we're checking resistance, and we want to see that we have very little resistance. So I'm going to touch both the tip of the plug and the top of the float. And I'm reading that there is continuity there, so we've got a good connection. Next, we'll do the same with the ground cable. So we'll check to make sure that we've got a good connection here with this cable, and in fact, this one has as we pull on this, we've got it stretching, which is indicating that there's no connection here. So we're going to have to replace this ground cable. Next, we're going to check the long cable, we call this the booster cable, that goes between the black box and the gray box. And we're going to check two things here. We want to check the continuity of the cable, and we also want to check to make sure that there are no shorts between the two connectors of the cable. So first of all, we'll check the continuity. We want to check from the tip of the 90-degree plug to the inside of the locking connector that goes on the gray box. So again, we're going to check with our resistance, so we're setting our voltmeter to ohms, and I'm going to contact the tip of this cable. Let's put it over here. There we go, the tip. And I'm going to contact the inside of the BNC, and I've got good continuity there. Next, we'll test from the shaft of the of the 90-degree phono plug. So you can see the tip is insulated with a white plastic insulator from the shaft. So now the shaft, we want to have good continuity from that to the outside of the BNC connector. So I'm testing both of those now, and I've got good continuity. Finally, we want to make sure that there isn't a short between anywhere along or between the two cables here. So we're going to just test from the tip to the shaft of this, and we'll check to make sure that there's no continuity between there. Test there, and here, and my voltmeter is reading that we have overload of resistance, so no continuity. That's what we want. Next, we're going to check the probe. And the first thing we want to do when we check the probe is to make sure that we don't have any wear through the insulation on the cable that goes into the side of the probe. And so we're going to want to inspect that very closely. If we can see any copper wires showing through that black insulation, then the probe isn't going to work properly. And sometimes it's difficult to see because that copper will discolor as it gets corroded. It may get kind of green or actually get brown. So check to see if you can see strands of copper in there. Actually, this one is in pretty good shape, so I think this can go another season. So now the next thing we'll do is we're going to check the other side of the probe now, and that is to check the plug end of this. The biggest problem we have with the probe is that over time moisture is going to drip down inside this plug, and it will start to cause shorting between the solder connections inside the plug. And the best way to test that easily is again to use our voltmeter set on our ohm setting, so we're checking to check resistance. And what we want to do here is make sure that we don't have any resistance between the different connectors on this plug. On this plug we have a tip, and we have a shaft, or a ring, and then the shaft. Each of these are insulated with white insulators between them. So we're going to check and make sure that there's no continuity between any combination of these connectors. Tip to ring, ring to shaft, and shaft to tip. Tip to ring. Oh, we're showing some continuity there. Now we'll do tip to shaft and shaft to ring. So because of this, because we have some continuity between these two, we have a couple options. The easiest thing to do is that this may just be due to some moisture inside here. So what we'll do is we'll unscrew the black plastic covering from this, and then just hold this piece in front of a heater or a hair dryer to make sure that we bake out any moisture that might be inside the plug causing that continuity. If that doesn't solve the problem, it may be that this plug is going to have to be replaced. If you feel handy and you're good at doing that, you can find a 3-connector phono plug at a Radio Shack or another electronic supply place, and you can do that installation yourself, just making sure that you connect the proper wires to the proper connector. Otherwise, send it back to us. We can do that replacement, or we can replace the probe altogether.